74 ballistic missiles launched within an 11-minute window from 9 dispersed sites across western Iran. Road mobile launchers that had spent 3 weeks repositioning at night under bridges tucked into mountain passes specifically to deny the satellite imagery American planners had been updating every 6 hours. All 74 aimed at a single hull. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier. 100,000 tons of American power projection. 5,200 people aboard. This was Iran's answer to what happened on February 28 when the first Israeli F-35 is crossed into Iranian airspace at 0140 local time, followed within 40 minutes by American B-2 Spirits flying their long cold arcs from Diego Garcia. Throne's decision-makers had already made their calculation, not whether to retaliate, that had been written into IRGC doctrine years ago. The only question was how to impose maximum cost without triggering a response that consumed what remained of Iran's military in a single night. They settled on the carrier. To understand what Iran was attempting, you have to understand the logic of the shot. A carrier is not just a military target. It is a symbol with specific arithmetic attached. The USS Gerald R. Ford represents $13.3 billion in steel alone. Its air wing adds another $5 billion. The $5,200 personnel aboard cost the United States a decade and several $1,000,000 each to produce. Damaging that ship changes a conflict not because of the metal, but because of what it tells every government watching whether American carriers can be struck. It tells Japan. It tells South Korea. It tells Taiwan. It tells every nation that built its security around the assumption that the United States Navy is the unchallengeable backstop of the international order. Iran understood this perfectly. Iran had spent 20 years understanding this. The 74 missiles were a deliberate mix. 41 Shahab, 3 variants flying depressed trajectory profiles to maximize terminal speed. 17 Fedeta 313 solid fuel missiles from coastal platforms exploiting shorter flight time to compress the intercept window, and 16 upgraded Zolfaghar-II missiles carrying maneuvering re-entry vehicles tested only twice before their terminal guidance signatures carefully hidden from American surveillance satellites. The maneuvering vehicles were the dangerous ones, not because 16 missiles overwhelm anything on their own. Because a maneuvering re-entry vehicle turns intercept from a solvable algebra problem into three-dimensional chess played at Mach 4, you cannot simply extend the ballistic line and place your interceptor there. The target moves, and when it moves at hypersonic speed through the upper atmosphere, the window for a lethal intercept shrinks from seconds to fractions of seconds. Both sides had done this math. The question was whether the math matched reality when 74 objects appeared on the same radar screens simultaneously. The Ford's Combat Direction Center detected the launch signatures at 0317 not from shipboard radar but from SBS, the space-based infrared system that watches for the thermal bloom of a ballistic missile motor and transmits detection to fleet units within seconds. The strike group's response was immediate. The cruiser USS Bunker Hill's Aegis system began calculating intercept solutions before a human had processed what the display was showing. SM-3 Block IIIA missiles, kinetic kill vehicles with no explosive warhead, just metal moving at Mach 15, began leaving vertical launch systems within 90 seconds. The first Iranian missile died at 71 miles altitude, 340 nautical miles from the Ford. By the time that debris cloud was spreading, 4 more SM-3 intercepts had succeeded. 17 missiles survived the first layer. 11 of those were conventional Shahab variants, predictable in their terminal phases. SM-2 missiles handled 8 of them. 3 reached the inner defense perimeter. The 6 Zolfaghar maneuvering vehicles were a different problem entirely. One made a 1-2-degree azimuth shift at 68,000 feet, enough to force a recalculation that consumed 2 interceptors instead of 1. A second Zolfaghar maneuvered at 55,000 feet. The SM-2 passed within 40 m and detonated its proximity fuse. The fragmentation damaged the re-entry vehicle's guidance electronics, but did not destroy the airframe. The vehicle continued descending, partially blind, still supersonic, still aimed roughly at the Ford. The tactical action officer watched a single-track symbol continue its descent on his display after an intercept that should have resolved it. He had 4 seconds. CIWS take all close-in weapon systems free. The Ford's 4 phalanx Gatling guns converged on the track. The damaged Zolfaghar detonated 340 m above the water, 680 m off the port bow. A fragment struck the ship's sponson and left a 4 inches gouge in the steel. No personnel, no systems damaged. The Ford had been struck by debris from a missile that failed to be a missile. In the history of American carrier operations, that barely registers as an incident. It will, however, appear in every naval warfare school's curriculum for the next decade. Because what it represents is proof of concept. The maneuvering re-entry vehicle got close enough to leave a mark. The full engagement lasted 9 minutes and 47 seconds. Of 74 missiles launched, 69 were destroyed at various defense layers. 3 impacted water within 2 nautical miles. 2 were killed in the terminal zone. 1 left shrapnel in the sponson. 0 American casualties. The Ford never altered course. On the narrow metrics, it was a complete American tactical success. But here is what the narrow metrics don't tell you. The Ford strike group expended 63 interceptors during those 9 minutes. SM-3S, SM-2S, evolved Sea Sparrows, phalanx rounds consumed at a rate the group's logisticians immediately began calculating against available resupply. Resupplying a carrier strike group's missile magazines takes weeks. The closest facility was Bahrain, which Iran had simultaneously struck with a separate salvo, complicating the timeline considerably. The exchange ratio is the number that matters most. Iran spent approximately $180 million firing those 74 missiles. The American defensive response cost between $900 million and $1. $3 billion in interceptors. Every time Iran fires and the United States defends, Iran spends $1 and the United States spends 5 to 7. Iran's planners studied this exact dynamic during the Ukraine conflict, watching Russian drone salvos drain Ukrainian interceptor magazines. They understood the goal was never to sink the Ford. The goal was to force continuous expensive defense until maintaining carrier presence became the story rather than the campaign it was supposed to be enabling. Iran had 700 missiles left. The American response began 47 minutes after the last track symbol disappeared. 44 Tomahawks launched from the destroyer screen, targeting the 9 launch sites backtracked from the Iranian missiles' own flight paths. Road mobile launchers that fire reveal their position. Many had already moved. 14 strikes hit active or recently vacated positions. The Ford's air wing launched its first strike package at 0519 F-35Cs targeting the fixed infrastructure supporting Iran's Western missile network, not the launchers themselves. The nervous system those launchers depend on Fuel Maintenance Command Authority. That process takes weeks, not hours. By mid-morning on March 1st, the shape of what was happening was visible to anyone watching the pattern rather than the individual events. Iran had launched its most significant ballistic missile attack against American naval forces in history. Defeated tactically, 0 casualties. And Iran had proven its maneuvering re-entry vehicle works. Its mass salvo doctrine stresses the defense and the exchange ratio bleeds the defender faster than the attacker. Oil markets opened at $178 per barrel. The Strait of Hormuz remained technically open. China called for restraint. Russia said nothing. Nuclear talks in Vienna were formally suspended. The after-action analysis will be studied at every naval warfare school on Earth. They will find a 93% intercept success rate extraordinary, representing decades of investment. They will also find that the 7% penetration came specifically from the threat category Iran had invested most in developing against a 74 missile salvo. 7% means 5 missiles in the terminal zone. On a different night with different warheads, that is a different story entirely. The lesson Iran draws, the maneuvering re-entry vehicle works. Build more. The lesson American planners draw. 74 missiles cost more to defend against than to fire, and the next salvo will be larger. Neither lesson points toward a short conflict. The Ford is still there. The flight deck resumed operations 22 minutes after the last inbound track resolved. The tactical action officer wrote his after-action in the neutral language of a man whose words would be read by people who were not in that compartment, who had not watched that one track symbol keep descending after the intercept. That should have stopped it. He wrote, defensive engagement successful. Further engagements assessed as probable. He did not write the number sitting in every mind watching those displays. Not the missiles destroyed, the missiles remaining, the carriers are in position, the missiles are fueled, the negotiations are gone. History is watching as always with complete indifference to how any of this is supposed to.